Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Pulse of Prevention. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Jeff Horwitz, the CEO of Safe Project. It's a national nonprofit whose mission is to overcome mental health challenges and end the addiction fatality through prevention. So, Jeff over here previously served 28 years in the United States Navy and held senior roles, including the General Counsel of the White House Military Office. Today, he leads an organization founded after the tragic loss of Jonathan Winnefeld to an accidental opioid overdose, a loss that turned into a nationwide mission to save lives. Jeff, thank you for being here. It's a privilege to be interviewing you as well, because it's so rare to see someone serve at such high levels in national security and then continue that commitment through nonprofit leadership. So thank you, Jeff, for being here.
Thanks for having me, Sai. I really appreciate it.
Of course. So the first question I have for you, Jeff, is I know you served 28 years in the Navy and you work at the White House Military Office. What really motivated you to transition into leading a nonprofit focused on addiction and mental health? And was there like a specific moment when you realized that this was the work you wanted to dedicate yourself to?
Well, Sai, after working and spending so much time in the Navy, I realized through my life that mission-driven type work was most important to me. It was more than making money or doing anything else, is really being mission-driven. I knew Jonathan Winnefeld, who is the young man who passed away on his fourth day of college from an overdose after treatment, and I knew his parents. And when they asked me if I would join the cause and help them build the nonprofit, it was really actually a pretty simple answer. Only the logistics came in the way because I really didn't want to move. But short of that, that's was an easy answer. And as I've spent more time working with them, I've learned more and more about this mission and what we do and how addiction and overdoses for sure are absolutely preventable. But the stigma is so large, I can't let go. I've got to stay and keep fighting.
That's actually a great inspiration, like especially for like others to join into the nonprofit space and see what impact they can make actually. So my second question for you, Jeff. So after like serving at such high levels in the military and federal government, how did those experiences prepare you to lead the SAFE project? And like what has leading SAFE taught you about leadership that you may not have learned before?
I think that one of the interesting things is when you serve an active duty, you know that everyone that is there is driven towards a mission and following the calling as the direction of that mission is. What we know in the area of mental health challenges, substance use, addiction, we know that there's different ways to look at the issue. There's different challenges and different perspectives. And I think the opportunity that I have and what I've learned more and more about leadership skills is not that you need to treat people where they're at, but you need to be open and receptive to different motivations, different focus, different approaches. And if there was one approach to do this, it would be a lot easier at the end of the day. But the truth is, if there was one approach, we wouldn't have this crisis. And by seeing people in different perspectives, those that believe in harm reduction, those that are in recovery, those that are in different multiple pathways, it all seems to allow you to have more of an open mind and not really worry about is really to worry about the big picture.
Yeah, for sure. So have you seen this issue from both a federal government perspective and a nonprofit perspective? So from your experience that you gathered throughout, where are we falling the most in addressing substance use disorder? Like where are we failing the most?
I think from a federal government perspective,
Mhm.
we're failing to a large degree by allowing the development of a number of different silos instead of having a comprehensive solution. We know that you can work on prevention, but prevention's not enough. You can work on treatment and recovery, but that's not enough. You can work on not arresting away individuals that are struggling from a health condition that is treatable, uh, but you can't do that unless you do it all at the same time. And in order to do it all at the same time, you need a sort of a comprehensive solution that I don't believe the federal government is currently prepared for and currently capable of doing, especially when politics play its role, as well as there's so much competition in the federal government for resources, for sound bites, for everything. In the nonprofit world, we have the liberty of doing what we want, but that's where we struggle too. because the nonprofit world is very siloed, especially in the addiction arena. You'll hear of many nonprofit that focus only on prevention, or many that focus only on recovery, many that focuses in college and universities, or other factors and EAPs and healthcare plans. At the end of the day, what we did was we took the approach of being more comprehensive with everything to try to break that down and try to get folks to work together. But there's no real incentive for individuals to work together either in the federal government arena or the nonprofit arena. And I think that's where we fail, and we really fail to overcome this crisis.
Yeah, I've actually interviewed like many people from the prevention sector, and they only shared experience on the nonprofit world. I've never seen someone who has experience from both the federal government and the nonprofit world, so that's pretty cool to hear. So my next question is this: despite increased awareness, overdose deaths, like especially among young people like youth, they remain really high. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a number of factors,
Mhm.
overdose deaths remain high, not just with youth and young adults. Overdose deaths remain high with everyone. And I think that we'll see some moments when it will start to decline, regardless of efforts and administration, as folks get smarter about how to address things. But at the end of the day, I think there's a couple factors that are affecting everyone, and certainly youth and young adults. The first one is just stigma. Stigma is the biggest factor to addressing this overdoses and addressing substance use that is out there. There is stigma and discomfort to address it, so that they're not talking about it. There's stigma and challenges to ask for help, so no one's asking for help. There's stigma and challenges that says you're making bad decisions, and so it's your fault. And I think that when you put all those things together, it just becomes really hard for young people as well as adults, but especially young people who are trying to explore and really find themselves. It's more challenging to not speak up, or it's easier not to speak up, and more challenging to speak up and do something more. And so, as the world continues to silo themselves and say, well, we've taken care of this crisis because we've taken care of the importation of fentanyl, or we've taken care of this crisis because we're stopping cartels. The truth is, it's overlooking some factors that everyone should know and everyone should accept, and that is things like the genetic connection to addiction is pretty high. And there is a greater chance that you can receive the genes of addictive behavior than breast cancer or than adult asthma. But those things aren't discussed because we're focusing right now on supply when we should be focusing on supply and demand. And there's all those factors there. I'd say there's one other factor, and the factor is that drugs, including cannabis, are not the drugs and cannabis that your parents had or that your grandparents had and that we have dealt with in the past. The ability for these drugs and substances to be tweaked, made stronger, it's a whole different world. And so, in areas where family members or friends might have thought it was okay to experiment in the past, you're experimenting with something far more dangerous. So it's just there's not enough information. There's so many factors out there.
Got it. So, like, branching off the factors you just said, do you believe like this is primarily like an issue of insufficient policy, gaps in education, stigma, or lack of access to treatment? Because obviously all these matter, but like, what do you believe is like the most critical one to address first?
I'm going to upset your side. There's no one issue.
Right. Yeah.
It's really all these factors. I mean, we talk about the need to do a lot of things at one time. And one of the examples we use is this. If we were able, and let's just focus on the opioid crisis, we know that opioids can be highly addictive, especially if you have a susceptibility to an opioid. We know that it could be as early as 3 to 5 days of taking an opioid that you can become addicted to an opioid. So if we could talk to physicians and tell doctors to reduce the amount of opioids that they prescribe, instead of the handful of 30 they used to prescribe when I got my wisdom teeth or when my kids got their wisdom teeth pulled out, that's great news. But the reality is about 80% of heroin users today started from an addiction that was created from a use or misuse of an opioid. So if we cut them off at the medical side, at the doctor side, what happens to that addiction?
Right.
It doesn't go away. So the end result is that addiction goes out to the streets and people are buying the
Mhm.
opioid to take care of pain, either to keep working or because they can't beat their addiction. So you have to deal with the law enforcement side. Well, if you can deal with the law enforcement side and you can get law enforcement officers to stop arresting and getting people into treatment, then all you need is a treatment facility. But there aren't enough treatment facilities. And if there are not enough treatment facilities, what do? You go to a community and you ask a community, can you build more treatment facilities? And because you never took care of stigma in the first place and public awareness in the first place, the immediate response is going to be the simple one. They're going to say, no, I'd rather invest in my schools. I'd rather invest in my libraries and my public services than I would do in addicts and junkies, because that's how they're interpreted if you don't stop for a minute and look at public awareness.
So Safe Project works through different initiatives, and for the viewers, if you guys don't know, they have programs like Safe Communities, Safe Campuses, Safe Workplaces, Safe Veterans, all those different programs. But Jeff, my question for you is, how do these programs actually function on the ground, and what makes them like really effective?
So what we focused on was, if you're going to be collaborative in the type of work you do
Mhm.
and collaborative with people that are out there, you really need to understand the people that you're trying to help and what they're doing. So each of our portfolios works a little bit differently. We know that in colleges and universities, you can talk a lot more about harm reduction and substance use and experimentation, things like that, that there's stuff out there. So you need to work on harm reduction factors, or you can talk about prevention differently than you would, for example, in other areas. In a community, when we go into a community, we know that we have a lot of other concerns, and youth and young adults, your elementary school experimentation, high school experimentation, and the modeling that parents do by having drugs in the medicine cabinet that are just there for the sake of having them there.
Right.
And we also know that in the military arena, we know that the military folks, the active duty and veterans, caregivers, and their families, they're not going to spend the time ever talking about mental health challenges or substance use because they fear that their jobs or their retirements are on the line. So for them, we talk about health and wellness. We talk about them trying to find their true best self. For college and universities, we'll work with the colleges and we'll work with individuals in recovery. But in those worlds, we talk a little more about different types of prevention and certainly harm reduction and the value of recovery. In our business portfolio, what we have to appreciate the fact is that businesses are there, number one, to make money and to support their families. Now, I can't talk to a business about you're really going to lose money if you lose individuals in recovery or you lose people in active addiction and you don't treat them. But that's really what we have to do in that world. And that's a different world altogether than how we talk to folks in communities.
Right. So yeah, so you talked about like different groups, different communities, but based on like the both experiences and data you guys gathered from all of those, what do you think like the top three strategies that have the greatest impact in preventing substance misuse is?
Top three strategies to prevent. I think that number one, any strategy has to stop or it has to start with a collaborative understanding of stigma. It has to start with a collaborative understanding that whether you believe that addiction is a disease or you just take it on board that it is a treatable healthcare health condition. Everyone needs to start really at the first strategy is really to start and lean very heavily on the pure basic standpoint that stigma is important, that stigma is out there. I think the second strategy that really has to be involved is meeting people where they're at and making sure that you are using compassion, empathy, and understand that everyone's journey, whether it's a journey that doesn't touch substance use or a journey that does touch substance use, is very different. And you have to be appreciative of those things as you go. And I think the third part or the third strategy or idea that we keep in mind with everything we do is we keep in mind that just providing a resource or just talking a resource doesn't necessarily meet all the needs. When the Winnefelds were struggling to try to find solutions for their son, they tried to find a treatment facility for their son. It took them 3 days. When they did find a treatment facility, they didn't understand that recovery was a lifetime journey. Had they understood that, maybe their approach would have been different. Not really sure. You can't guess. But we do know that those are important factors. And then when Jonathan passed away of an overdose, he was in a recovery room with Narcan on the shelf that could have saved his life, but it wasn't used. Not exactly sure all the reasons why, but just by doing something and leaving resources, you can't be there. If you can keep all those in mind and treat people and have those conversations, I think you'll be more successful. And that's really what we try to do.
Yeah, those are really helpful. Like maybe for someone who's watching this and they have no idea, they could take this into mind and then implement that. So now I'm moving into like a more youth focused. So as a high school student from day to day, I've seen like my peers, I've seen kids out in my school being exposed to substances earlier than ever. I've seen them vaping, drugs, things like that. So what role should young people play in prevention efforts and what practical actions do you think students can take starting today? Like maybe someone who's watching this video that they can start taking today.
I think, Sai, I think that uh, the student role and your role is essential. I think your role is certainly far more important than my role
Mhm.
because I know that as an outside voice, me talking to the folks in your high school will be less effective and than if you talked to them and you worked and you took care of them and helped them out as well and showed them the voice. So I think the first thing is number one, it's essential. Number two, there's nothing wrong with having that conversation. If you have a friend or you see a peer that is struggling, you should offer to assist them or help them find resources. Have that conversation. The one thing that will happen if you're wrong and they don't want that is that they will ignore you or it will be a bad conversation. But the best thing you could possibly do is help them along the way. Protective factors are really important. And you are a protective factor for your peers, whether you know it or not, as well as their families. So, building that and keeping the education and using your voice to do that is really important. I'm not suggesting you go around and say, just say no, just say no, just say no. But what I am suggesting is that as a peer, doing things like you've done in talking about prevention, in talking about drug disposal, as you did a few years ago, and getting rid of drugs that are in people's medicine cabinets, and having that discussion about why it's important, you have a voice that way. Now, the truth is, the other source that you can rely upon is I know that there's so much information out there and looking on the web or looking elsewhere to find the information to know that parents are not just making up stories because they just don't want you to they want you to go a certain way. It's out there
Right.
and there are risks and being smart and being educated and sharing with your friends is so important.
Yeah, I totally agree, sir. Because I feel like a student who was like going through like the substance usage, they would be like much more scared to go to a adult because they would get in trouble rather than coming to a student and talking about it. That'd be much more efficient and effective. But if you could speak directly to teenagers like who are watching this right now, what is one message about addiction that you would want them to always remember throughout life?
I think the most important thing to remember is the that addiction is really is not a failing. It's not a moral failing. Addiction is something that can happen to any of us. It's out there. It's a risk. We know that adult asthma can happen to adults. We know diabetes can happen. We know that breast cancer can happen, and that's where addiction is. And so there are genetic carriers, but there's also other carriers and other factors that might lead to behavior that leads you down an addiction pathway. And so, what I would say is number one, understand that it's not a moral failing, but it's something you should be cognizant of and helpful of and work and share with your peers and your friends to work through. The second thing I believe that you and your peers should probably do is appreciate the fact that sometimes it seems like it's something easy to do and it gets you down a path where you can get out of it. But just know that there are risks, and so always have a friend, always discuss it, and always share it with it. I also think the third thing is, and this is where it's going to be on a case by case basis, but I do believe that it's really important to speak out, to support your friends, and encourage your friends to talk to an adult. And because if the conversation starts early on, and the parents do their job to talk early on with their children and be trusted, then that's a great opportunity. If there's a trusted adult out there to have those conversations early on, so much easier than if you're in trouble or you're struggling, because then you're always going to think exactly what you just said. You're going to get in trouble. And I don't believe that there's anything your parents want more than to keep you safe and sound and alive. And they too need to learn the ways of addiction too. And so maybe learning those things together might be helpful.
Yeah, I know you covered a little bit about the parents, but if you could like speak directly to the parents of the teenagers who are watching this, what could you tell them like the most important point?
I think I would tell them the most important point is to listen,
Mhm.
not just talk.
Right.
To listen to what the struggles are that your children, the students are going through. It's really it's so easy to be judgmental, right? Because you just want everything to be perfect, but the world isn't perfect.
Right.
And so be open, be affirming, and rather than say, "What did you do?" I think the question is, talk about it, and don't just leave it open with leading questions and have a conversation. I also suspect that if some parents would look back on their days, on their youth, there might be some things that they might not have openly discussed with their kids. And I'm not saying it's necessarily with substance use or otherwise, but probably didn't discuss that completely with their parents. So be fair and understand that the world is different. The world is a lot crazier now than it was before, and have an open mind when you talk to them.
Yeah, I think that could really help families listening. So my final question for you, Jeff, if there's one key takeaway from this conversation that you hope leaves a lasting impact on our audience, what would that be?
I think that I guess what I would say the one key takeaway uh, is it's here. You can't close your eyes, and substances, our mental health challenges, or the pressures of the world today are going to disappear. We know that it's here. And we also know that there is day to day stuff about mental health that will challenge us every single day. Turn on the news today and you know that there are challenges. And there's also an opportunity or a risk of substance use and addiction that might come from that. There's also just simple pathways of all these challenges. So I think there's really two key takeaways instead of one. The first one is open up the conversation, keep your eyes open and have an open discussion because those are out there. Those challenges and those risks are out there. They can't be ignored. And the second key takeaway is something that we didn't talk much about, and that's this one. We gloss over the world today and do our jobs and we do our studying and we move along. But we need to learn protective factors for ourselves as adults and as children and as young adults like yourself. You need to step back for a minute and say, okay, do I understand what the emotional stressors are, the emotional triggers, the emotional things that drive me crazy? Not all of us are the same, but different factors will affect us different ways. And then the question is, how do I cope with those? How do I deal with those? They're not going to go away. So do you do distraction through art? Do you do meditation? Do you do yoga? Do you go run? Those are the things that you should have in your toolkit and your parents should have in their toolkit. And you all should share those things so that the answer isn't, oh, well, you're stressed, go listen to music. No, you know what will help you cool your heels and get yourself back and focused. And that's really important, understanding your stressors and your coping mechanisms and having open conversations.
Right. Hopefully people can take this away. Hopefully like they can have a lasting impact with this information. I think it's truly valuable information from your experience and everything. But Jeff, thank you again for your leadership and for taking the time to share your insights with us. To everyone watching, thank you all for joining and listening to Jeff's valuable experience. If you'd like to learn more about the SAFE project and how to build safer communities, check out the link below. I'll drop it over there. But thank you guys. I'm Sai, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Sai.